Hello and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm your host, Bobby Howard. With me today, Ty Lee Jameson, still over in Europe. This time, I think, with the Italians doing some, shenanigans. He was wearing one of those weird little bird masks thing, like at Carnival. So he's having a good time. But Ty and I are here to, Ty, what are we here to talk about? This is a bit of a weird stretch of the offseason. Softball and baseball, literally just started. So there's not a ton to dive in there. They're still in their early stages. OU basketball still kind of weird, really. Not a lot to talk about. They are what they are. The OU women's basketball is great, by the way. Massive game on Saturday against Texas. Make sure to get out there. But in terms of football, we got a little bit of information about the start of camp, but really that's about it. We're kind of at the we're kind of at the stage where nothing's really happened yet.
For sure. I think I said it on the last podcast, but we are in that period of the calendar where no news is good news by almost any measurement. There's no good news that comes out in sort of this period in the calendar for college football, unless it's just something completely off the wall. So generally, if we had big breaking news at this point in the season cycle, it would not be good. So disappointing for people who are itching for their OU football fix, and a bit disappointing for those trying to make content from OU football. But ultimately, if you're a fan of OU football, no news is good news at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want anybody getting in trouble, doing some sort of, auto dealership scheme that, gets you in trouble and suspended. Shout out Rhett Bomar, but never shout out Rhett Bomar. That sort of deal. You never want that sort of thing. So all is quiet, all is good. But look, here's what we're going to do this episode. So Ty, you and I, we've pieced together some kind of evergreen overall questions about OU, the SEC, just overall type of stuff. But so this is kind of a bit of a wild card episode. We're talking about everything. But that also goes for y'all. If y'all have any questions for us, if anything pops into your head that you would like to talk about, that you would like to ask us about OU, about the SEC move, about the Big 12, about anything, we will be happy to answer it. And we're just gonna kind of hang out here on a Tuesday night. But yeah. So Ty, you and I, we're good for this wild card set because both of us kind of can get out there. I know you and I, one of our first podcasts, we ranked overall mascots, which ended up in talking about Fighting Okra, talking about Keggy the Keg, that type of stuff. James Thrice mentioning that nothing good comes out of basketball news either. Alabama, geez, what is going on there? Brutal stuff. But yeah, no, Ty, this is just going to be a weird one. So, what's your first question? And I don't know, what are you thinking? What question? What should we talk about?
Yeah, so my first question is actually a question that I also have. I'm going to pull the curtain back and reveal that I do not know. So I will ask you, Bobby, our first viewer question. When does spring practice actually officially begin?
Yes. So this question was actually asked last podcast, and I saw it, tried to Google it, couldn't find it. And that's because it wasn't out yet. But Brenton Venables just announced, I believe it starts March 22nd is the date I remember seeing for 2023. They're currently in the Schmitty stage right now. But spring practice should start on March 22nd is the date that I saw.
So a month and a day from our recording on the 21st here.
Yeah, I think I'm right. That's the name. That's the date that's seared into my brain. But also, I'm kind of an idiot, so you never know. I'm pretty sure it's March 22nd is the start of spring practice. I will say, by the way, I like how Brent Venables actually had a bunch of guys come up and speak. He had all of the, transfer portal guys and kind of new signees. They had them. They made them available to the media, which is a total turn from what we've seen in the past. Very recently with Lincoln Riley not letting Caleb Williams talk, that sort of stuff. So it was good to see that kind of change, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like there's buy-in by the players into the team and the organization and what you're building. But I understand the arguments for trying to protect someone from the media. But I feel like ultimately there's tremendous buy-in from people, especially people entering a system. If they can go out there and have an opportunity, not open mic to just tell their story, but they can tell their opinion, let it out and let it be heard. I think that's a very important thing to someone, especially initially joining an organization like you're talking about, feeling like there's buy-in and they're able to have a voice and everything. I think that's extremely important in the college football realm right now with the amount of player freedom that there is. But I think that's just extremely important with any organization, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And, James brought up a really good point there that BV said there'll come a day where they won't want to talk to the media, so might as well let them do it while they're still excited. That's a good point from BV there. I do love that. James also brought up a great question as well. How much playing time do you think Jackson Arnold gets in 2023? He's guessing he doesn't redshirt as early as a month ago as he thought he would, but he thinks he'll play a little bit in mop-up duty. Ty, you've been a big anti-Dylan Gabriel type of guy, so what's your take on this? Do you think Arnold gets some burn here with the Sooners?
Yeah, you gave me a good lead in. I was going to say probably not the first 3 games because I think that's too early to fire your quarterback, but hopefully he'll start and all the rest. But I think more realistically, I think he's going to get play time. I really think the college football sort of field is shifting. I think you have to give a guy play time with the amount of freedom, especially because everyone's been utilizing the transfer portal, but quarterbacks especially. I mean, the transfer portal is more or less a thing that was meant for quarterbacks, and then sometimes other players can use it. But I think you have to give a guy playing time as much as he wants. I almost feel like redshirting will become less and less common with certain positions, quarterback being one, as the college football pendulum starts to adjust to the transfer portal and everything else that we have going on. Obviously, there might be further regulation in that, but I think specifically the redshirt system of college, I think you are maybe better off, especially if it's a star guy or a high potential guy, to go get them playing time and burn that red shirt, because then, hopefully lowers chance of a transfer because they're not sitting around doing nothing, had all this hype coming out of high school or wherever else, and now they feel like their name's not on ESPN anymore because they're sitting on the sideline and they're disappointed about not getting a chance. But also, I don't necessarily know that red shirt matters as much, even if he is staying at your school and playing, because we're seeing so much freedom of movement. And then, the draft stock for quarterbacks just continues to rise. You continue to see just baffling quarterback moves into the NFL draft moves, I guess. So that was a really long form answer for, I think it is very likely that we will see, like you touched on, more than burning a red shirt. So that would be 5 games would get play time. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to. My hope would be more than 5 games and hopefully some meaningful play time, as in, hopefully gets a whole quarter in a couple games or something where you can really get your rhythm in as a quarterback, I think is important.
Yeah, and that point you mentioned about how the transfer portal has kind of changed the way you handle situations like this, I think you're spot on. I mean, we just came from a situation where Nick Evers left because he wasn't satisfied at OU, and I mean, he entered the program knowing pretty much he wasn't going to be the starter, and Jackson Arnold's coming. So, to me, I think you do have to kind of throw him a bone a little bit in terms of letting them play, getting them early exposure. I think if you want to keep them longer term than as a freshman, you have to kind of you have to kind of showcase him a bit beyond just your, early season game against, Southeast FCS state, like in NCAA 14. So I get it. I personally don't see him taking over for Gabriel. I'm still kind of a believer in Dylan Gabriel. I think he's solid. And I think Arnold, as much as he is a talent, I think him waiting a year behind an established quarterback like him would be very, very helpful. And I do know he can run. He's not quite the like Caleb Williams type runner where you can bring him in a pinch like Caleb. We saw him before he supplanted Radler. But I think we do see him a solid amount more than you would see a normal freshman kind of young quarterback. I think we see him way more than we saw Spencer Radler when he was a true freshman, for example. I would not. Yeah,
we had the best quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Playing for us when he was.
It's not saying much. It's not saying much now that I think about it. But
yeah, if you have Jalen Hurts as your starter, then yeah, I don't care who you have. Yeah, sit back there. Give Jalen Hurts all the snaps he needs. But yeah, it can be a bit of a different calculus depending on.
It's take a seat, buddy. It's you got Jalen there. So I think we do see a lot of Arnold though, and I'm excited to see him. I think he's super dynamic. I love what he can do on the ground. Love what he can do through the air. He's been just very exciting from what we've seen. His highlights at Denton Geyer. So I, for one, very, very pumped. But yeah, that's all we got from the YouTube comments right now. Feel free to keep those things coming, everybody. Keep the questions rolling, and we will answer them. Literally almost anything we will answer. That is how desperate we are for content, folks. Anyways, let's get to some of our questions, Ty. And I want to ask you, which player from last year do you think is going to make the biggest leap from the previous season to now? Looking at that Cheez-It Bowl, we saw a couple names really pop out, a couple players that we think really could blow up into that next year. Any names to you that stand out in particular?
Gosh, that is kind of a rough one. Obviously, and this is sort of beating a dead horse at this point, but Dylan Gabriel maybe makes a legitimate Heisman run. But I think I want to go with I'm trying to make a decision. I've been known to curse running backs, but I kind of want to go with a running back for this one. I feel like there's the most potential there because there's no one specifically that really jumps out. Receiver, you might have a receiver as the answer to this one. But I would like to go with a running back. I'm not entirely sure. I'll go with
Marcus Major. By the way, I think Marcus Major is still at OU. So
yeah, so obviously that's the perpetual answer. I mean, Knowles or Sawchuk. I mean, I can't really narrow it down more than that because I just don't know. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more in the practice as it comes along. I think running back is going to be one of the position groups that's really going to be heavily impacted by the strength and conditioning program, which that takes time. I understand they had the whole summer last year, but 3 months of lifting and then right into playing all your football, that's not a whole lot of time to actually put on good lean muscle mass. So I think they'll be really affected by a lot of the stuff that's happening just on the offensive side. Defensive side, maybe some more people. You kind of put me on the spot with that one. I think
a little bit. I apologize.
I think it would be best for OU if it is someone in the running back room that really has a breakout thing. Because not to hammer, again, beat the dead horse with my perpetual Dylan Gabriel takes, but I would love for him to do good. I do believe in him more than it seems on the podcast. That is a bit of a running joke, but if you have a receiver that really explodes and has a ton of talent and you got a guy that can't even get the ball within 10 yards of him, it doesn't really matter how good your receiver is. So obviously that's a bit of hyperbole, but I think a running back would be the most important skill offensive position for OU.
Yeah, no, and I actually fully agree. I was going to say it's going to be either Javante Barnes or Gavin Sawchuk. That duo was electric in the Cheez-It Bowl. I loved both of them, and it's truly exciting to see both of them. I'm fully with you on that one. But other guys, I mean, it's pretty open. We have a question from our guy Jimmy, who will replace Mims. I think that's a problem. I don't really know who is going to replace Mims. How do you replace a Marvin Mims? There's nobody in the room right now, I think, that is capable of, really being that type of burner. At least that we've seen, being that type of, big play, big catch type of guy. But we'll see. I don't know. It's tricky. It's so hard to figure out this far in advance. But go ahead.
I don't have an answer specifically for that one, but I think this is a rare case where Bobby might just be wrong, because just specifically when he was like, "Oh, who will replace Mims?" But turn the clock back and we're going, who could ever replace CeeDee Lamb? Who could ever replace, Marquise Brown? Who could ever replace Sterling Shepard? We do tend to either have a system that just produces them or get really, really lucky. I don't want to say that it's just, we had good quarterbacks, so we are making our wide receiver one look good, because all those guys also went on to be very successful. Some are still being successful in the NFL. So I think wide receiver is a position specifically that is just one of those things that I don't even know if it really shows out in practice. You just see it in games. Guys just show out. So I'm very confident that we will have a as good or better Mims replacement halfway through the season.
Yeah. So. No, I agree. And that point you made about we're always wondering, who's going to replace this receiver? That receiving room has always been very, very good. And I think that it's going to continue to be the case as well. Anyways, also great question from James here. Would you rather have one great wide receiver or three really good ones? I'm with him. I would take the trio.
Yeah, if you're talking about one guy that's like a 99 rating, obviously you can't just have one. So let's say, would you rather have one guy that's like a 99 rating on a video game and then everyone else is a 65 rating? I would rather have three guys that are an 80 rating, because I've said this take so many times. I think in college football, the depth of defenses really isn't there. And this might change a little bit in the SEC, but generally teams only have one really good cornerback or safety. They have one really good secondary player. Sometimes they have two, and then everyone else is just kind of good enough. The rate that secondary players go to the next level, I don't think it's a little bit less than some of the other skill positions. And I think that if you have 80% guys, I would rather have that organization at any level. I'd rather, if I were hiring employees to work fast food, I'd rather have 3 good employees than 1 rock star and then 2 that I have to babysit a ton. But I think in college football specifically, you just present a terrible dilemma to defenses if you have more than one good receiver. I think OU's in a position receiver room wise where we could have, 4 good receivers and 2 amazing receivers too at any point.
Yeah, and I will say, thinking of 3 good receivers gives me a little bit of, bad flashbacks to that one specific recruiting class that had all the.
They were never good. They were supposed to be good. They were never good.
The only one that was decent for us was Theo Weiss. The rest were injured or got, into trouble. So, what can you say?
We didn't get into trouble.
Also, Theo Weiss was injured.
They went out of their way to rob people.
They didn't just stumble into a rob.
Find themselves robbing drug dealers.
Whoopsie.
In apartments. So,
geez. Yeah, you don't just. That's not a. Shout out to Nate Oates. That's not a wrong place, wrong time situation. You don't just stumble into accidentally knocking a guy out with a pistol. Anyways, Ty, look, I put you on the spot earlier with a question, so it's your time to hit me with one of yours. Even though I've seen them and cannot put me on the spot, essentially. But if you have one that you want to get me back on, let me know.
Yeah, so I'm gonna I know I sent mine to you. You had asked me to send you 5 sort of questions just in case we didn't get viewer questions. I'm gonna take them out of order. I think the one that fits right now the best is if you could replace anyone on OU's coaching staff, who would it be? And the kicker to that is who would you replace them with? Because obviously just firing someone is no good if you're not going to replace them. So
Right.
who would you fire from OU's coaching staff? And then who would you replace them with? Say blank check situation. Obviously, you can't say, "Oh, I want to fire our defensive coordinator and I want to hire Nick Saban to be our DC." But,
Yeah.
so if you fire the DC, it's got to be replaced with a DC. If you
Yeah.
know,
They
if
they
that
have
makes
to be
sense.
currently in that position
They could
at the
be
college level.
in the NFL too. They could be in the
Okay.
NFL if you want to say, "Oh, I want to bring this coordinator who's the guy that was a coordinator for the like Joe Brady, the coordinator. I think he's still up in the NFL or something. Might be dating
Yeah.
myself with these.
Oh, yeah. It's not. You're not dating yourself, Joe Brady. I mean, that was as recent as like last year, I think, with the Panthers. Um, Man, that's a really good question. Um, and I think you do have to. I'm not ready to give up on Levy, but I'd be very cool with getting rid of some of the baggage and kind of moving on. I liked Joe Brady in the first place instead of Levy. I'd be okay with bringing him back and seeing what we could do. Uh, and I that but I will say you brought it up, so that's a little tacky to take what you said and just kind of package it there. Um, Man, it's good because I really do like our staff. Um, and if you gave me another year and things went sour, you would start to think about Bean Bow. There's an obvious one though, Ted Roof. You got to get rid of Ted Roof. Um, Ditch Ted Roof, replace him with defensively. Who's damn good right now? I will say Jimmy in the comments has a great one with Bronco Mendenhall. Hell of a coach right there. So I'm not stealing that one. Not stealing that one. Um, Man, who would be a killer DC? Who would be really really good? Um,
This is a tough one because
it
at least
is.
for me, when I think of all of the, oh, this guy's a good hot DC, most of them, anyone that I can think of, they're now head coaches at different places. So it's kind of difficult to one for one a DC with a big name, I guess. I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe would do a better job than Ted Roof as a DC, but
Yeah,
advertising, they need
especially
to advertise themselves more. I have a need for the product, but I don't know where to go get it.
yeah, and I mean especially because as a DC, what am I trying to say here? I mean, that was Brent's position. He has been a DC all the way, so it's he hasn't had people under him, so to say. Um, Hold on. I have a wild idea. I have a wild idea. Um, I don't know if I love it, but I kind of slightly like it. What if? Hear me out. Coach O, defensive coordinator. Let's get
I was gonna make a
weird.
joke. That's what led me to the Joe Brady thing. I was gonna make a do we fire Brent Venables and hire Coach O?
Look, Sugars doesn't exist anymore. Coach O is not employed. He was a D line coach in basically his entire run through. So look, wait, bring in Coach O. Let's get weird. He can't cause havoc. Maybe he's bored and wants to get back into the game. He would be a he would be a great recruiting force in the SEC. He brings that energy. Maybe doesn't fit with Brent's values. I don't know, but Coach O at OU, it'd be kind of fun. I don't think he would take it, but also this is this is a workshop where we're just putting in coaches out of nowhere. So
Yeah. Well, I think that's a sufficient answer to the question.
yeah, or like Coach O, offensive analyst. If he just wants to hang out chill at Ocon's, that sort of deal. I will say, Plains Runner over here, Todd Bates for DC. I like that too. I think Todd Bates, obviously the credentials are there. It's going to be hard to keep him away from a DC job eventually. So I could see that being a very natural promotion.
But. Yeah, I think ultimately, hopefully, because Venables comes from just systems, just really good organizations with Bill Snyder at K-State, and then Bob Stoops at OU, and then Dabo Swinney at Clemson. Those were all very low turnover in the realm of college football. Those were all very low turnover organizations when it came to their staffs generally. And those were all organizations that had an organization set up where it wasn't necessarily too dependent on one specific person. I think that was sort of the opposite of what we saw under Lincoln Riley. I think the Lincoln Riley system, and I'm not trying to, down it or anything else, but I think some systems are very dependent on the specific people. I would love for OU to have a system. Bama is a great example of this, where, yeah, it's very dependent on Nick Saban, but you can plug and play with DCs and OCs within the organization that's there and not have too great of a variance in what you're producing. So I would love for OU to have that system. I'm not advocating for, just perpetual mediocrity or good enough, but I think, best case scenario, we have a system where it's not super dependent on, we need this specific guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say the first Alabama finally has kind of reached that point where they're like, yeah, I'm not really sure about this. If we could just keep plugging dudes in, and that's okay. But it has worked for so long where the system just churns and operates and it's smooth. And I do love that. It's an element of being bigger, the program being bigger than one person, each room being bigger than just that coach, where they can move on and there's something left there that people can move on and continue on with, which I think is great. But Ty, I gotta say, looking at both of our questions, my questions are kind of dumb. I'm not gonna lie. Yours are very good. So either I'm gonna give you this choice. Which question would you rather answer? Best helmet in college football, or one of your questions? Because I do love your questions, and we can get weird with it if you want to answer what you think the best question is. But we're kind of on a roll with some of the serious college football talk here.
Best question. No, we'll save best helmet for the end, just because I want to double check some stuff.
Yeah. So let's go with one of your questions, because I think you're doing a good job. Also, audience, feel free to ask some questions. You all have been great tonight. Here's one that I like. If you don't mind, I might just steal it because I grew up an OU fan since I was very little. You've been all around. Ty, if you weren't an OU fan, who would you cheer for?
Well, so this question, it was a little bit more tailored towards you specifically, because I'm known to have I'm like sympathetic to this. I think I have 4 different teams that I claim to be a fan of just in the Pac-12. This is a weird answer, I think, because it's not one that I typically answer on the podcast, but I remember when sort of, because I didn't really start to pay attention to college football, OU football, especially until 6th grade, middle school. But I lived in Florida for a time before that, and I remember thinking that the Florida Gators were really neat. When I lived there, it was sort of the first time I noticed college football. I remember seeing people doing the Gator chomp, and I like the colors. I mean, it's the same color scheme as the Thunder. I think it's executed much better at Florida than it is at the Thunder, but that's a whole different discussion. But so weirdly enough, maybe Florida, because I think that would have been, and then that sort of broadly aligns, because I'm trying to think about this. If I did not have OU, I would probably be a Florida fan, especially if I was getting into college football as a fan around the time that you and I were in about sixth grade, which was right at the, so I think when we were in seventh grade would have been that OU Florida national championship. So it would have been a natural progression for me to think Florida was really cool from seeing the fans in Florida when I lived there, and the little Gator Chomp I thought was cool, like unique fan things. And then they were also really good right when I was starting to like college football, the sport. So I think if I didn't have OU, I think undoubtedly I would be a Florida fan.
Yeah, no, I get that because Florida's brand is awesome. You know, not just the Gator, but the swamp and everything. As you mentioned, the Gator Chomp is pretty cool. Those teams, the Tebow teams, were very, very fun to watch. Very awesome. They just had a mystique to them that was really, really cool. You know, it felt like a big deal if you were in the swamp. It felt like that team was, you know, and not only that, but I think they had a different coolness than like Alabama has right now. I mean, Alabama doesn't even have a logo on the helmets. So, you know, the vibes are different. You know, it's just a different it's a different energy. You know, the branding is just not quite the same as what Florida has. You know, the colors are exciting. All of it is, the mascot's cool. It's an alligator, and you know, guess technically Alabama's, you know, you got the you know, you got the elephants, the Crimson Tide. It's just a kind of an amalgam of weird things, which by the way, I gotta say, can we talk about how both Alabama schools have the most confusing brand identity ever? On Alabama's end, you have the elephants, but also a giant red wave. On the Auburn end, you have you know, the Tigers, but also an eagle. What is it with Alabama and not having any idea what their identity is? It's kind of weird. So Florida, great choice. For me, it's tricky because like you said, you know, this was kind of a question geared to me. I would say right now, like where I sit right now, TCU would be such an easy type of team to like. You know, if OU just didn't exist. I think their branding is cool. I think their energy is fun. That type of stuff really would draw you in as kind of a, you know, a non, you know, if you don't have a place to go, that would be where I'd be drawn to. I think Fort Worth is awesome. And, you know, it kind of aligns weirdly enough with, you know, my soccer team. I'm a big fan of the Tottenham Hotspurs, or of Tottenham Hotspur. With the weird chicken, the weird vibes they got going on there, I kind of translate that as well to what TCU has in a weird way. So right now I'd pick TCU. If it was when I was a kid, when I first started watching college football, I'm trying to think of a team that was good but not too good. Because I wouldn't go with like the early 2000s Miamis. Definitely not USC. Texas wouldn't be it either. And I'm not saying Oklahoma State because that wouldn't happen. But it also probably would be Oklahoma State if we're being frank. So, let's see. Of that era, who was really, really fun?
Well, so wait, what year frame are you talking about? Because would you? I think you got into college football earlier than I did, so I think you would have been like USC would have been sort of the best team of that time frame. I think.
Yeah, I could see myself going like that early Oregon, like Mike Bellotti days. You know, back, you know, 2002. You know, when they 2003, something like that. Whenever they had oh shoot, who was that? Who was the quarterback who made NCAA that one year? I could see myself going with Oregon, riding with them. You know, because that's when I first really started watching 2002, 2003, because I was really into it like as a little kid, but not really couldn't understand it. You know, in like 01, right after OU won it. But
Joey Harrington.
Oh my gosh, yeah. God, yeah, that was.
But yeah,
I'd probably go Oregon because they were kind of fun. That, like a lot of kids, that was a team that a lot of people drove towards. Some of our comments are interesting. Not gonna lie, probably Nebraska, says James. And look, I really do enjoy Nebraska. That is a great place, great people, really enjoy them. That could have been it too. Nebraska was really good in that early 2000s run. People forget they made the national title as early as 2001. They got blown out, but they were there. So that Eric Crouch kind of era could have drawn me in. Jimmy says LSU. Not gonna lie, it's hard for me to separate myself from my just natural disdain of LSU from their years of providing me pain. 2003, all that. But hey, they're a fun fan base, so I get that. But I don't know. It would be interesting based on when I would have gotten into it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer, though.
Yeah. Ty, I'm gonna let you do another question as well. Sorry for stealing that one as well. I am truly desperate as my questions are crap. What do you got for us?
So this one is a very different vein than sort of the last one because we didn't really have a specific set of boundaries. But I wanted to have one that was sort of a bigger question mark, maybe I don't want to say a harder hitting question. That seems a bit presumptuous, but has NIL actually done anything tangible for OU? Like, because I really don't. So let me preface that or your statements by saying I don't know if I could really put my finger on one thing that says like, oh yeah, NIL got that guy here or kept that guy here when it comes to OU. I know you can point to examples at other schools. I don't know if it's just not being covered in the press, which wouldn't make any sense. Certainly that stuff would be evident. If someone had a massive NIL deal and they're advertising something or something like that. But I don't know if I can point to NIL as of yet, because I think eventually it will. Has NIL ever actually done anything tangible for this OU team? Obviously, it helps that people are making money. Maybe somebody would have left if they didn't get money, but I don't know if I can point to any player or even position group or anything where I can say, oh yeah, NIL did a lot for getting us that guy or whatever.
I would say no. I think it's hurt. Obviously, it's helped student athletes. Being able to get paid has been awesome. That's been great for them. But if we're talking about has NIL been has it provided a competitive advantage for OU? I would say no. Specifically because OU, the teams they're recruiting against, the teams they're going head to head with, is severely undermanned in the NIL department compared to Texas A&M, Texas, Alabama, the Georgias of the world. Just look at the fundraising. Some of the stuff we've seen. With God, I don't even remember some of the names of it. But all of they're like 40 different NIL collectives. OU can't figure out on one to really go all in on, and the fan base is kind of confused. Not only that, but whenever they do find one, the fundraising is just not even on the same par as, let's even say Auburn. Auburn is lapping Oklahoma in NIL fundraising. And I'm not sure why that is, but I will say it doesn't bode well if the fan base can't respond to it or if things don't change. There is a question of, hey, look, do the fans have to sort of pay the players themselves, or is that a fair system? Especially when the university is making as much money as they are on football, obviously can't use those funds to pay the players. But if I buy myself a hot dog at the OU game, none of that money goes towards athletes. If I buy a shirt, that's not an NIL like based item, it doesn't go towards the athletes. So there's like a lot of money that goes into the OU experience that is not being spent on athletes. So if you're doing that, and then on top of the donations and the ticket cost and everything that goes into being a college sports fan, if you're asking them to, this is going on to a separate rant, but if they're asking them to then now pay the athletes themselves, I can see how that's tricky. But the thing is, every other fan base totally fine with it. They're working on it. Not every other, but a lot of the other SEC fan bases that we're competing with on a day-to-day basis, they're okay with it. Auburn, they don't care. They're throwing money at it like it's nothing. And perhaps the culture's just not there yet. I don't know. But it's to really get to the root of it, NIL has not been the kindest to OU. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure we would have David Hicks in this class. He'd be a Norman right now, and he's not. So that's just one name of many. They're correcting it. They're getting better. But to answer your question, no, I do not think it's provided an advantage for where OU is, who they're competing against, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I almost think a few quick points on that. I think OU's at a weird point where we have enough money to NIL around. If you're talking about, the basically the laundered money that's just coming from the school and going to the players, we have enough of that obviously it gets spread around, but not enough to do those big deals like Texas or A&M or, like you said, just all sorts of SEC schools are able to do. I think maybe that's on our organization itself. We're not figuring that out. I think the money is there when it comes to the donors and fans. I think everyone that is spending money on OU football is a donor to some extent. But yeah, I think that's on them to figure out. But I think at the same point, we have enough where we can sort of throw it out for stuff like that. But then I feel like when you look at just specific players, some of the smaller schools are maybe in a better position because they do that thing where they just have a bunch of money saved up and then they just throw out the absolute bag for like one specific dude. And then you got, like one big 5-star and you're like, why in the world is he committing to this place? So I think it has helped some of the smaller schools, but yeah, I think when it comes to OU, the location I think is also a bit of an issue. I think you start to see the pro sports big market, small market thing coming into play because like Dylan Gabriel, the only thing I can remember him actually advertising, this is like the real intent of NIL, is making the money on their stuff. The only thing I can remember him advertising is like there's a boat store that's like next to the McDonald's dumpster, like behind the McDonald's dumpster in Norman. And that's the only thing they did a commercial with Dylan Gabriel that's like still running. Not to like, yeah, I'm not trying to like
boat store you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not trying to talk bad on the business. If you own a boat store, but you want to buy the cheapest real estate, obviously. So probably a good business decision there.
You're right off Highway 9. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, but there's just who in Oklahoma. Obviously, Oklahoma has a lot of sort of bigger businesses, especially in like the OKC area. Not in Norman. We have the boat store, and then the largest employer is the university. The university's already, we've covered that bit, and then you go up to the city and like Boeing is not going to NIL someone. They don't care. They just employ a bunch of engineers. They have no benefit of like NILing a college football player. Paycom has no reason to NIL an OU player. They're a national. If they're going to, they're just going to get the Heisman winner, or some guy from Stanford that was in the Heisman running and can speak business or whatever else. Like if you start to look at every corporation or every large business in Oklahoma, there's not really a whole lot that makes a ton of sense for NIL. Whereas I think some of the other places have, just a larger market, larger city, more opportunities for stuff to get NIL'd around, I guess. Also, a lot of these big companies like the only ones that I can think of in Oklahoma where I'm like, oh yeah, I could see them doing an NIL deal. It's all Oklahoma State people that own them. So
I will say, shout out to Schwab Meat Company for getting Caleb Williams before Caleb Williams was really, really good. They had that man eating glizzies, and now he's wearing Beats by Dre. So Schwab, They got the vision before everybody else. But no, you're right. The industry is small. Mainly because it's hard to promote that unless you're being just like that one Miami NIL situation where like the entire team is promoting like a pacemaker or something, like something very weird. I can't remember their situation.
Unbelievably Miami. Yeah, we don't have the retirement market here either.
Yeah,
to advertise to them, unfortunately.
That's true. Yeah, Miami's NIL is it's Miami. So what can you say? What can you say? Well, Ty, I gotta say this pod has gone pretty smooth for not really having a ton of a game plan. But I will say your questions immaculate, and the questions by our listeners also just awesome. So we've really appreciated them getting involved as well. What do you think? What should we wrap this thing up, or do we want to answer the college football helmet question that I came up with? Clearly not my finest producing moment on my end.
Yeah, I think one final question, doesn't have to be that one. I know we have a few more pre-prepared ones, but I think maybe one final question. I'm not sure how many of mine we asked.
Let me hit you with a mini question because
we can ask the helmet one too.
Yeah, a mini question because the towers are getting torn down in Norman. That's in process, residential towers. Which was your favorite, Ty, back in the day? Adams, Walker, or Couch?
Oh, well, I think I'm obligated to answer Adams.
Yeah, Adams was
where I met my wife there, so I would have to.
Technically outside.
That's the only safe answer.
Technically outside of Adams, but you okay? Good point. Never mind. I mean, I met Daria. I met my wife and Adams as well. So, but even though it was a crappiest of the three, it had the most charm and it had Canes. I feel like that's where we all hung out, which it makes me sad that it's the first one to go because it was the coolest of all of them. So I'm with you. I'm sad to see that one go. Jimmy asks, are we going to the spring game? I know I will this time, actually. Don't have a wedding this time on the spring game. So that date is cleared. April, blanking on the date. Didn't know that. But yeah, spring game should be good. I believe Kyler Murray, I think his statue is getting revealed for that, which would be great. April 22nd is the spring game date for that. I will be there. It should be fun.
Yeah, same for me. Unless something comes up, I am as of now certainly planning on it.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll have a whole bit of content on spring games as a whole, and then what we're looking forward to.
Yeah,
this one and everything else. I'm sure as we get closer to that,
they're gonna try to top the attendance from last year, which I don't think is gonna happen. I feel like last year had a lot of excitement, a lot of newness, a lot of hype. I mean, just great, just given by our podcasting last off season, we had stuff to talk about.
We had
hope, and it's different when there's like hope, and you never know what's gonna happen. But when you're fresh off of a 6-6 season, it's hard to be like, well, no, this year now we're going 12-0, like they're gonna be good, We saw what we saw, and it's hard to not unsee it and think that it's not going to happen again. So I do think they'll be better. But it's the hopium is not quite there this time out. But do we want to do one more question, Ty, or are we calling it good? What do you think?
We'll do the helmets. What is so? I guess what is the best helmet in college football? I'm going to say we're going to exclude OU from this.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's OU's normal helmet, the only helmet that we should have. But I think exclude OU from this. So for me, I'm going to have to go. I want to not to sort of put myself in a little box, but I want to keep it sort of with stuff currently in use. I think, I don't know, a best of all time is hard because there's just so many good, like super, super cool one-offs. And I think sometimes like it's just with some uniforms, it matters like when they're worn, like the 2020 Navy helmets for Army Navy, the blue granite ones. That game was like a later in no, it wasn't later, but it was like super foggy and dark, and just the lighting was just ideal for those, and those were already super cool. They look great on TV, so those certainly are ones that jump out. God, this is an edgy one. This is a very, very edgy one, but I got to go with tradition. I got to go with simplicity. I got to go with instantly recognizable. I got to go with, transcends the sport to some extent. Iconic. So many things you can say about it. Not necessarily pro the team, but I think there is a very, very good argument that I'm going to tie myself to here of in regular use helmets that are still currently in use. I'm going to go with Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is very strong. That is on my short list of what I've thought about. Not just the iconic golden domes. They're not just a golden helmet, but the way they use the gold. The gold being specifically like sourced from the same flakes of gold. It's actual gold. The same flakes of gold that they use to put onto the dome on campus, where the helmet kind of mirrors it. Mirrors that dome, mirrors the reflection of it, is just genuinely cool. No other college football team or any helmet is remotely close.
Yeah, I was going to say, funny enough, Jimmy in the comments came up with what my second one was, which was weirdly enough Florida State, because I think the Florida State one, I like the branding. And I think it is the best execution of sort of like a style, specifically like I would group everyone that uses helmet stickers into one style. Obviously, Ohio State's the most iconic of that, but I think Florida State has the best execution of that, just personally, of that design. So yeah, I think Florida State weirdly might not be up there with a lot of other people's, but I think Florida State is up there for, I think, best sticker helmet. In my opinion, I would go Florida State. That's a very controversial take. I think college sports as a whole, I think a lot of people would vilify you for not going with the Buckeyes.
So it's funny you say that, because Florida State was top of my list. I love the spear. I'm no, for real.
That's hilarious.
The spear, the garnet, and the gold. It's so cool. I'm a big fan of any helmet that isn't just like, the main team logo on the side, or, nothing, or just like a letter, but the ones that get weird with it. So in the NFL, we're talking like the Vikings little horn thing, the Rams before they redid their helmets and logos and all that. The Ram horn, classic. Anything like that, I think, is just the best. I'm in love. I love that sort of thing. So the spear, to me, I think, is the most unique in college football. It's cool. It's iconic. It's very forward, I think, in terms of just how it looks. It's awesome. I'm a big Florida State guy, but in terms of the iconography, yeah, the Ohio State helmet, it's not bad. I think it's cool the way they do the Buckeyes and all that, but it's also like really crappy at the start of the year, which I know kind of has part of it. But I don't know. I think it's on the overrated end of famous helmets.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would go with that. I think it's the standard. I think it's the standard for really good, in my opinion. So if I had it on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being the worst, 4 being the best, the Ohio State one would be at 3 for me. And then that would be the threshold of, is something better than this one? That's what puts it into the great, if that makes sense. At least for sticker helmets, I would have them categorized sort of by design styles. sort of like some of the stuff you talked about. Just is it a primary logo thing? Is it like some sort of icon or whatever? I mean, we could do a whole podcast on just helmets specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Because obviously visual stuff is great for the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But I will say, because we're talking about iconic ones, I think everyone can close their eyes. Don't close your eyes if you're driving, by the way. Do not do that. Hypothetically, imagine these helmets. Specifically, you know what we're talking about when we're talking about Ohio State. And I will say this is a really hot take. I think Michigan does the helmet stickers better than Ohio State does. With what Harbaugh has started doing, where each sticker kind of has its own meaning and like iconography. So, for example, if you make the Orange Bowl, you have a little Orange Bowl sticker that stays on your helmet your entire run through. And I just think that's really cool, because it becomes this tapestry of what this player's career was. And at the end of their run at Michigan, they get to take the helmet home with them. So the stickers are cool. And then not to even mention the fact that little winged helmet, whatever that little icon like logo is that they put on there, that only like them and Delaware and Princeton have, it's iconic. So, Michigan is very high up there. That is an awesome helmet.
Yeah, I gotta echo what you said about the sticker execution. You know what I said about FSU having the best in the sticker category, but I think just stickers alone, I also absolutely adore the idea of being able to tell what's going on with the stickers. At least there's some, it's a little bit user friendly for people just looking at them.
Yeah, because Ohio State, they're just like, I don't know, there's some Buckeyes, we're just slapping them on. There is some system of how they get them, but nobody really knows. But with Michigan, it's like, you get it. They spell it out for you. They tell you what's up. Jimmy says his favorite is in the NFL is the Dolphins, which I love the Dolphins. Great color scheme. That's not my favorite helmet in the pros. I think it's gotta be, the Rams kind of screwed it up for me. It's hard to beat the Packers with that yellow and the big G, but we're drifting off into different territories here. Ty, I'm sure you probably think it's the Cowboys.
Oh, it is. It's undoubtedly the Cowboys. It's
not,
and that's not a bit. I think, instantly recognizable, just say so much. I would say close second for me would be the Pats. But yeah, I think it's the Cowboys for sure.
That is a whole different rabbit hole
that's a brand. Yeah. It's kind of a brand recognition thing too, though. But it's like, I'll give you a worst helmet in college football just to wrap it up. BYU, because it's every time I look at it, just until very recently, I learned that logo means BYU and not Yale or something else. You can't have blue and white and then just Y is your logo.
Yeah.
When your school is BYU, that doesn't make any sense. It's confusing. It seems a bit like when an off-brand is trying to like trick you into, something. You're on Amazon, you think you're buying Nike, but then you notice that like it's like Nike with two eyes or something like that. That's the BYU helmet.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. You know what helmet I think is like the most overrated, the worst overall? I think the Penn State helmet gets way too much love. Just the white helmet with the little blue stripe down the middle. I get why people like it, the classic and all that. I don't think it deserves praise. It's just kind of there. It's not iconic to me. Most little league teams wear the Penn State helmet essentially because they can't afford or don't want to, because they're kids. You don't want to put a bunch of money into kids' helmets that they're going to outgrow. But they all just wear the little white shells every time you do. Like when I was a kid, I always was looking forward to middle school or high school where it's like I actually get a colored helmet, with a logo on the side. So growing up, I hated the white shells. So why do people like these white, boring Penn State helmets? It's the worst.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have it. I think it's just there's stuff going for it. There's stuff not going for it.
Yeah, I think we've probably tapped this conversation out for the time being.
Yeah.
But it's all good. Well, folks, we started out with a couple questions and a loose plan, but we're here 1 hour later with a podcast, folks. This was a great time. Ty, thank you so much for hopping on, for providing great questions, lifting. Really, you really were the MVP of this show by far, because my questions were awful. And I really appreciate you, man. It was a good time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Dude, anytime, of course. Well, for me and Ty, this has been the Schooner Pod. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for your questions, your interactions. We'll see you next time when we will find something else to talk about. We'll see you when we get there. Have a good one, everyone. Boomer Sooner, everybody.